वाङ्मे मनसि प्रतिष्ठिता मनो मे वाचि प्रतिष्ठितम् आविराविर्महीधि वेदस्य महानीस्थ श्रुतं मे मा प्रहासि अनेनाधीतेनाहोरात्रान् सन्दधामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारमवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Om. May my speech be firmly established in my mind. May the mind too be firmly established in my speech. May there be perfect correspondence between the thoughts, the words, and actions. O self-effulgent Lord, be revealed in my consciousness. May the truths of the scriptures come to me. May not what I learn from them ever forsake me. Let me live my life day and night according to their teachings. I shall speak what is appropriate. I shall speak the truth. May that protect me. May that protect the teacher. Om. Peace. 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 It is our ego that blocks the awareness of our divinity, our true, infinite, ever perfect, ever blissful self. Let us imagine our ego, which is identification with body, mind, and all that is subject to change. Let this ego be thought of as a salt doll, a doll made of salt. The salt doll is diving into the ocean of Satchidananda, the ocean of infinite absolute existence, absolute knowledge and absolute bliss. As it dives into it, this ego doll is dissolved. Let us feel this false I is gone, completely dissolved. It has become now the infinite. I now realize that I am existence itself. I don't have birth or growth or decay or death. I have no desires, for I am all that is. I am free from all sufferings. Having realized my ever blissful true nature. I am peace itself. Om. Peace, peace, peace. So, dear friends, let us begin today's discussion with our usual prayers. Tava kathamritam tapta jivanam kavibhiriditam kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadattatam Bhuvi Grinanti te Bhurida Janaha. We had been studying this very special spiritual biography of Sri Ramakrishna, where Sri Ramakrishna is shown as not only a physical entity, but the divine appearing as a human being. It is difficult to describe these things, as the author has mentioned that the awareness of Sri Ramakrishna eludes description as such. It is difficult to understand and much more difficult to tell, because the words, they, while they have the capability of explaining some of the things in the world, they do not have any skills in explaining the transcendental truths, but they can indicate those. And thus, we have to use our that understanding to follow what the words are indicating rather than the word meaning. So it is, and this is something that is not seen in the world. What is seen in the world by us, it can be explained through analogy. That it is, if somebody has, say, not seen a yucca, then you can explain it to that person by, say, giving some comparisons with potatoes and such things, that okay, it is something like that, very starchy and so forth, that is yucca. If somebody has not seen a tiger, you can say, look, have you seen cat? And then it is, imagine a big cat, and that can be eating a human being also, very powerful. So think of that. So you can, by analogy, you can explain things in this world. But when it comes to such person who is human and yet not human, it is acting as human. That is why it is called Leela, a play. Always remember that we have seen this example up to times, that, well, like an actor on the stage. On the stage is showing one appearance. In the acting is showing like a Macbeth. But then in otherwise he knows that he is some John Smith. There is no contradiction as such between them, because even while acting as Macbeth, this man is very well aware that he is actually John Smith. So Sri Ramakrishna, even while acting in a human body, is perfectly aware that he is not bound by this human shape. He is not human but is divine. And thus it is difficult for us to understand that each of us is actually divine, but we are not aware of it because of our identification with the role that we are playing. It is thus, if somebody is playing the role of Macbeth and forgets that he is actually John Smith, will be in a very difficult, precarious position. So, that is what is happening with us. We have forgotten our true divine nature, and we have identified ourselves with the body. So, the whole purpose of the advent of God in human form is this: to show to humanity that how you also are divine. That, look, I am like human being like you all are, and yet I am divine. So you also are divine. So this is the way of training, way of teaching. And therefore, Swami Saradananda, the author of this book, an intimate disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, is explaining that look, Sri Ramakrishna lived on two planes. When he is in this state called samadhi, he is not aware of the body and the outer world. He is completely identified with the divine nature. There is no human aspect at all to be seen by others. He is in what is called nirvikalpa samadhi. Even it would be his pulse will stop, all the signs of life would go from the body, and no breathing, no pulse, the eyes will not show. That is where the doctors examined him, putting finger in the eye, that whether the person responds. No, was all like dead. So, and yet in a while, short while, in maybe few minutes or sometimes a longer time, it is again appearing in the human form, living. So, this is not possible for our understanding, because we don't see. If we see a person that no breathing, no pulse, no blood circulation, no cognition, then dead. Come on, bury or burn that body. It is so we can't understand that this fellow again starts walking, starts talking, just like an ordinary person. It is not at all understandable. And this was happening in Sri Ramakrishna's life, not once in lifetime, not rare phenomena, but every now and then, something that was occurring multiple times every day. And so it is very difficult to understand. He is living on a completely different plane then. He is not dead, but he is not on the human plane. He is not aware of that. He is not living on that plane. But there are times when he is just like us, talking like us, walking like us, eating like us, falling sick like us. Everything like a human being. Except one thing, there are no selfish desires. That is the only difference. But otherwise, just like a regular human being. But then at that time also, Sri Ramakrishna, while seeing all other forms, yet was also aware that these forms, they are coming and going. They are not permanent, and in that sense they are not real. God alone is the reality that pervades all these forms. That was the consciousness of Sri Ramakrishna, even on the normal plane. He would see it like a child that is a little bit grown up from babyhood. So now sees the animal crackers, but is aware that although that is a crocodile and that is an elephant and that is a cat, yet is also very clearly aware that it is all the same substance. So Sri Ramakrishna is aware of that too. That is why he can become a teacher. A teachership is like that. The students, whatever just the students know already, if the teacher keeps on repeating that, that will not have any, I mean, it is useless. And if the teacher is telling something which has absolutely no connection with students, again it is useless. So Sri Ramakrishna on these, together on these both planes, human and divine, would explain things in human language, but connected to the divine. So this is how the life of Sri Ramakrishna on ordinary plane was. It is both are very clearly seen, and that is therefore a complete knowledge. Like it is, I see that this is Adam, and that is Rosio, and that is Jitendra, up there is Prithvish, or yeah, is he? I am aware of that. But that is only a partial knowledge. The true knowledge will be like Sri Ramakrishna is seeing. This is God appearing as Adam. This is God appearing like Rosio, and so forth, you see. It is God appearing as this. Are you getting it, Naomi? Yeah. So, this is how Sri Ramakrishna's knowledge was. And what we have been studying here is, because of this special awareness, he was capable of observing these very minute things on the regular human plane also, much more minutely, much more meticulously than an ordinary human being will be able to. Now, it's an amazing thing. But because of our attachments, what happens is our understanding gets clouded, and we observe, our observation becomes very partial. Whatever we want to see, we see. That's it. So it is dependent on our wants. That's it. It is, yeah, like we are so self-conscious. This is an observation that is very psychologically important. That look a group photo. If you are in the group photo, you will see where is my picture. It is so spontaneous. Where am I? Oh, okay, that becomes the your attention is drawn towards your picture. This is a common thing, because that is what is desired by us. Our desires color our observation, and therefore it is never very precise, meticulous, and expansive, all embracing. Sri Ramakrishna having no trace of ego. His observations are very, very keen. It is so we have been studying some such examples in these pages. I am on page 633. That we saw, because of this, he had the tremendous ability of using everyday examples to make very abstruse, difficult topics very easy to understand, very easy to appreciate. So we saw one example about how he explained Sankhya philosophy, where there is the idea of Purusha and Prakriti, a conscious principle and an inert principle combining together as it were to produce everything. That is the idea in Sankhya philosophy. You see everything, there is a conscious aspect to it. That is why we become conscious of it. And there is the matter, that it is the matter and consciousness, these two principles as it were combine. Don't ask how they combine, but they combine, and thus we see everything in this world. That is the Sankhya philosophy that Sri Ramakrishna explained, Purusha and Prakriti. Now just these technical words, who understands? So while he was telling, all the people listening, they were just looking at each other, what does it mean? So he gave an example with which they were familiar. Now in Vedanta, and the idea is different from Sankhya. This Purusha and Prakriti are one. They are not different. It is that which is all pervading, one without a second. That very principle, without any change, appears as this multifarious universe with infinite variety. Isn't it amazing? Just think of it, that everything is Brahman, same. At that level, everything is same. But otherwise, no two things are same. Not even two electrons, they are different. Two electrons in the same atom, they can be given labels because of some differentiation there. I don't want to go into the details, but this is a very important principle, that even two electrons, they will have their different characteristics, so that one can be identified as separate from other. It is here like we all are. Everybody has a different characteristic. All human beings, but still there is a difference in shape, difference in attributes, various attributes. And then thus we see that this is different from that, and yet all are same. So without any change, the one absolute divine principle appears as many. There is no change that happened in the one. It's yet appeared as many. This is, there is no two principles in Vedanta as against Sankhya. It is just one without second reality. It does not require a combination of two things to manifest as world. And there is that same one reality also appears without any change as this universe. So he was explaining, Sri Ramakrishna was explaining that another topic arose on page 633. I am reading. According to Vedanta, Brahman and its power, Purusha and Prakriti, are identical. That is, they are not two different entities. The same substance appears sometimes as Purusha and sometimes as Prakriti, like the same coin, obverse and reverse. They not different coins, but the same thing. Sometimes you flip it, it appears different. So it is like that. So Sri Ramakrishna gave a beautiful example there. Uh, when he saw that we did not understand this, the master said, "Do you know how it is? It is like a snake. Sometimes it moves and sometimes it remains motionless." I don't know if how many of you have seen. I have seen plenty of times that a snake just circle and just not moving at all, just still there. So, but that very snake starts moving. Now this same snake, that it is sometimes it is seen motionless, sometimes with motion. So that is how this world is. Sometimes it has that static aspect, sometimes has the dynamic multiplicity aspect. So it is. So he continues that it is like a snake. Sometimes it moves and sometimes it remains motionless. When it is still, it represents the nature of Purusha. Prakriti is then united with Purusha and they have become one. When the snake moves, Prakriti is then working, as it were separating itself from Purusha. As we visualize this, we asked ourselves, why could we not understand this simple thing before? That is why when it is explained, then it becomes so simple. It appears to be all simple. Like that Sherlock Holmes would tell his that assistant Watson when he would be puzzled. But well, how on earth did you understand this? And Sherlock Holmes would say, "Elementary, Watson. It is all elementary. See, it is so simple." And he also would say, "Yeah, exactly, it is so simple." It is our Swami Ranganathananji would say that, look, the problems, he had a style of saying this. The problems are complex, but their solutions are simple when found. So, it is like that. In Sri Ramakrishna's words, most complex problems of philosophy would just find a simple, tangible solution. So, someone once raised a question. Maya is God's power and dwells in God. This word Maya means why are we deluded? Why do we not see our true nature? Now there is no answer to this question. There is no why there. So we use a word Maya. That is, there is no further explanation to it. That is the meaning of this word Maya. It is this happening itself is called Maya. Although one, it appears many. Although we are ourselves blissful, we suffer. Why? We are ever free, and why do we have bondage? This is called, this phenomena is called Maya. There is no, again and again Swami Vivekananda in the great book Jnana Yoga says that Maya is not a theory. Maya is not an explanation. If an attempt to explain anything, it doesn't explain anything. It is a statement of fact that we are divine, yeah, and yet we are this bound. We are perfect, and yet we are imperfect. All these contradictions that we are caught in the life, That is called Maya. Contradictions have no explanation. Those who must have studied some little mathematics in high school, or so they know that when you arrive at a contradiction, then you give up the assumption. That is sometimes used as a method of proving something in mathematics. If you want to prove a theorem, then one method is like this, that assume the opposite of it, opposite of what you want to prove, and then you reach a contradiction. And then why did you reach the contradiction? Because that assumption that you made is wrong. So that assumption being wrong, its opposite must be right. So that is a way of establishing or proving a theorem. So you see, this is the Maya. It is all bona fide contradiction, and so one has to go beyond that. Now somebody said, well, this Maya is everywhere. Maya is everywhere. In the same treatise, Swami Vivekananda mentions that this Maya is everywhere, this Maya is terrible. And that Shankaracharya says everything is just Maya. So now how to, if everybody has Maya and it is God's power, some inquisitive listener asked Sri Ramakrishna that if that Maya is in God, so God also must be affected by that Maya, isn't it? So Sri Ramakrishna says, no, not at all. Although Maya belongs to God and dwells always with God, he is never bound by Maya. Look, whoever is bitten by snake dies. But there is always the poison, and the poison fangs are always in the mouth of snake, and the snake eats and gulps saliva through its mouth. But the snake does not die. It is just like that. Everyone present realize that this is the way indeed possible, that Maya is in God but doesn't affect God. But everybody else is affected by that. God is the Lord of Maya. So Maya does not affect God. But others get affected by it. So it is clear from these examples that when the Master dwelt in the normal plane of consciousness, nothing could hide its true nature from his keen sight. Changes in external nature could not hide themselves from his sight, much less changes in human nature. Of course, we are not referring to those changes in external nature that can be detected and understood only through instruments. Because he was not using any other added instrument. So, another amazing fact is that extraordinary changes and unusual manifestations in external nature that are not generally noticed by people were invariably seen immediately by the Master when he was in the normal plane of consciousness. Again, an example of very keen observation. And that keenness is because of lack of ego. And there is no clouding of that knowledge like we have. Our knowledge gets clouded by our prejudices, our little understanding, our ego, all that clouds our understanding. But in the absence of this obstruction, Sri Ramakrishna's observation was a very objective observation. The subject, the I, is kind of removed, and thus it becomes an objective observation. So, it is, it is by the will of God that all kinds of objects are manifested within creation. He directly controls the destinies of everything and everyone in the world. That is how Sri Ramakrishna could see things. This is how everything has a particular way of working. Even the laws, that idea will come in the next paragraph, that what we call law is works as long as it works according to the plans or desire of God. Otherwise it breaks. It is that is how the laws of science are. They work till a point when it is seen that there is a domain, only within that they are applicable, nothing beyond that. So it is important that we should see this. It is by the will of God that all kinds of objects are manifest within creation. He directly controls the destinies of everything and everyone in the world. It seems it was to impress this idea into the master's mind that the Divine Mother presented him with exceptional manifestations of nature that are beyond the external laws. Earlier we had read one example about it, that Sri Ramakrishna and then his caretaker Mathur Babu, who was supplying everything needed for maintenance of Sri Ramakrishna's physical needs. A very rich man, owner of the temple of Dakshineshwar. So Sri Ramakrishna and he, and there were some others also, were arguing that it is the laws of nature and all, they are all dependent on the wish of God. And Mathur Babu said, God may be the maker of the rules, but once the rule is made by God, then even God will not be able to overrule it. Sri Ramakrishna said, what are you talking? If somebody is making the rule, that somebody has the power also to throw it out, not to go by that rule. It is, and Mathur Babu could not accept this. Said, look, what plant, what tree is designed to get red flowers will get only red flowers, not white flowers. The thing remained just at that level point. And Sri Ramakrishna went out to relieve himself. And then on his way back, he saw that on this same hibiscus tree, on the same branch, there were actually two flowers. One was red, another was white. he just plucked that twig and showed it to Mathur Babu. Hey, what do you want to say now? Now Mathur Babu said, well, what more can I say? This is how it is. And it is true, you can see that the same plant may have sometimes another flower. It is so the rules, they are always full of so-called exceptions. It is, if it is rule, and therefore there is the saying also, a funny saying, an exception proves the rule. Now, it actually is breaking the rule, but why? What it means is that every rule has some exceptions. So, when the exceptions become too many, then there is an investigation, that is the rule right? And then you see that the rule itself had some problem, some mistake, and then the science has to change that rule. The students of science, history of science, will be able to see it easily, that how many times the so-called scientific conclusion of one time had to be thrown out of window because that was not true. So it is but it worked for some time. But then when more data emerges where it does not work, you have to then say that it has its limitations. So it is. So he so he said, if he so desires, he who made the law can replace it with another law. It will not be out of place here to mention a few examples. In college we were amazed when we read about some modern scientific inventions relating to electricity. One day, it is said, this is in 1880s, about how many? 140 years ago. So the experiments were going on. Michael Faraday was conducting many experiments, preparing rules of how the electricity works. Edison had not yet started manufacturing his things. Some of the inventions had come, but they were not really at the level of placing into shops or markets. So these college-going students, Swami Saradananda and others, one day out of boyish mischievousness, we raised that topic in the master's presence and began to discuss it with one another. Just mischievousness, this ignorant fellow, what he is going to understand about it. So deliberately, with some, as he mentions, out of some mischievousness, they started discussing electricity with one another. Hearing the word electricity repeatedly, the master was as curious as a boy and asked us, "Hello, what are you talking about? What do you mean by electric?" We laughed when we heard this childish pronunciation of the English word that was strange to him. We then described to him the general laws of electricity and also the use for the lightning conductor, that rod, to prevent the lightning from falling and destroying a building. So now also that practice is on. So it is because lightning always strikes the highest point the lightning rod should be a little higher than the house, and so on. The master listened to us attentively and then said, "But I once saw that wretched lightning strike a thatched hut instead of the 3-story building next to it. How do you explain that? Can these things be said precisely? All laws come into existence by the will of God, and they can change as He wills." While trying to explain natural laws to the master, we, like Mathur, could not find a suitable answer to master's question. We told him that lightning uh, gravitated towards this 3-story building, but some unknown event caused it to suddenly change its course and strike the hut. Now these laws, they are there, but there are so many reasons that can change that course of electricity. And there are many examples that happened where something that is low that got struck by the electricity, that lightning, and the bigger edifice remained unharmed. So you cannot precisely tell that. It is only there is only statistical evidence to show that it would happen in this way. So they therefore by strictly speaking, statistically strictly speaking, if suppose I just hit this wall in front of me, there is a chance that I will just go out of the wall because it is all the molecules that are becoming a solid wall. But there is a statistical remote possibility that at some point they all will be pushed to one side, and it will be all empty, because it is really the major part of it is emptiness. The major part is emptiness. This is again a simple scientific truth, that it is all empty actually. So it is possible that I can just walk through the wall, but it is very remote. What happened? Yeah, it is. Yeah, one can. It is there is the statistical possibility that it may happen. It is very rare that, but you can never rule it out. So statistically, it is difficult to assume that if you flip a coin, say head and tail, so it is not likely that you will get 10 heads continuously. But it may happen, it does happen, yeah. So that is how many times they, in that card game, somebody wins a big amount, has got 3 aces, and so he that put a big amount and then won it. So actually there is a big paper factory in India, a paper mill, which has the sign of this 3 aces paper mill, because this was built with that kind of win in a poker game. So it is unlikely, but cannot be ruled out. So it is Botanists have recorded some exceptions to the rule that plants that generally produce either white or red flowers. This example we discussed just now. Yeah. So the master saw a stone become conscious. It is, it is because it is consciousness congealed. Master could see the life consciousness everywhere. There is nothing actually inert for Sri Ramakrishna. Everything is pulsating with life. We are only used to certain types of life, and we just therefore brand everything else as inert, lifeless. No, life is, everything is living. Its isness is living. So is life too. So therefore, it is Sri Ramakrishna. He saw a man's tailbone elongate a little like animal's tail and later shrunk to its natural length. Actually, it happened to Sri Ramakrishna himself too, when he was doing the spiritual practice, like the Hanuman, because he was practicing the servant mood, that you approach God as the servant of God. Very nice attitude, constantly connected with God as God's servant, and the most laudable or glorious example of this is the devotion of Hanuman to Lord Rama. Hanuman saw himself as the servant, always at beck and call of Rama. So Sri Ramakrishna practiced this, and came into that mood of Hanuman. And then his body also took a change of shape. It is amazing, to describe how Sri Ramakrishna's body would change according to his mind, his height, length, breadth of the body would change, appearance would change. His disciples have seen it so many times. So, Sri Ramakrishna at that time developed a kind of tail, means it didn't go like a monkey's tail that long, but the tailbone got out like it, as if it is a tail. And then again, after this mood subsided after a few months, it again went back. So this is what happens. So same thing he has described about a spiritual attitude of a female. That also happened to Sri Ramakrishna. That being in that mood, he just behaved like a woman would. His appearance changed to a woman's appearance, behavior changed. Also, there was something like menstruation in his body. So, why? Because that is how his mental state would be able to change the body. We understand that, well, the software affects the behavior of hardware. It is like this, that it is the different mood, different feelings would change the body to that extent. And this is something that his disciples have seen and heard from very authentic sources. So it is, we shall continue to study this later next Tuesday. So we shall meditate on what we have read for half a minute, and then in case if you have any queries you are welcome to ask. Yes, any questions? Okay, Charlie?
I have a comment.
Okay.
I think that there's a possibility that there may be different levels of appearance of matter, like in our timing, when we see it with our eyes and when we see it through a microscope, that they're just separate appearances and they're not connected to each other. Because otherwise, a rock would not be solid if it's moving around all the time, or a wall would not be solid. So I think there's a possibility that we just see it as solid, but then there's another aspect of it when we look through a microscope.
And that is, yes, there is another aspect of it when we look in a microscope.
Contradiction, really.
Ah,
It's a contradiction
it
because
is.
it's moving and solid at the same time.
No, it is not contradiction because this it is in general for the most of the time it is solid. See, solid and liquid, they are not really two very different states. It is how closely the molecules are packed. That is how you call it solid or liquid. But that is how the packing of molecules. It is that is what you call solid. So when you heat it, what happens? The molecules, the space expands, and so they are not that closely tightly packed. They become more dynamic, and thus the same thing that you were seeing as solid, and with these very eyes you see it as liquid. Yeah. When the distance gets more expanded, you see the same thing as vapor, as a gas. So it is not that they are different fundamentally. It is the same thing. Sometimes you see it as solid, sometimes as liquid.
So I'm not a scientist.
But this is a simple, common, simple high school study of science. Not that you have to become a PhD, you see. So it is like that, yeah. Any other question? Yes, Abhijit.
So, when there is no movement, we call it consciousness, right? Shiva. And then when the same thing, same snake, when starts moving, we are calling it Shakti.
Yeah.
Now here is or Prakriti, right?
In?
Prakriti and Purusha, that's what
Yeah.
it was told.
Yeah.
Now here is the Prakriti and Maya, they are different concepts or the same thing?
No, in Vedanta they are same. Like in Shvetashvatar Upanishad, this verse comes, Mayam tu prakritim vidyat, mayinam tu maheshwaram. That the Maya is this Prakriti, and the one who controls this Maya is Maheshwara, the God. So that is how Vedanta perceives it, that Maya is same as Prakriti of Sankhya. It is just the different appearance again. Huh? Not Sankhya, it is Vedanta. Yeah. In Vedanta, as I mentioned right in the beginning, and we had many occasions earlier also to emphasize this point, that Vedanta does not, you know, assert this idea that there are two principles. It is only one without second, from which all these things, as it were, have appeared without any change. Like a movie appears on the screen without making the screen change. So it is that very thing is now appearing as multiple. This phenomena, this our perception, although it is contradictory, it is fact that although one we see many. And it is so complicated that we do not know whether anything is one or many. It is actually everything is one and many, not one or many. It is so. This is called Maya. In our logical understanding, thing would be one or many, but in fact, it is one and many together, depending on how you look at it.
Like in the last retreat, we had this discussion that the Swami was saying that changing is fine. It's just that our perception of that changing, we see one thing for the other. That is delusion. But
No, changing itself is also like that. That there is no actual change, but we perceive the change.
Ramakrishna is saying that changing and non-changing, they are the same.
Changing and non-changing are the same only because there is no change at all. Change is in perception. That thing doesn't change. It remains without any change. It appears as taking various forms. That is where the idea of change comes. In one there is no change possible. In multiplicity there is change. So the one appearing as many. That is how it is one yet many. It's unchanging and yet changing. It is that is the how one gets deluded about that. Any questions there?
There are no web questions.
Okay. So we shall conclude with the closing prayers. The registration for the Durga Puja event is now closed. We are full already, but yet those who wish to come, they can come for the afternoon session, for which there is no registration.
The afternoon session starts at
4 p.m. May the Divine, who is Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Great Spirit of the Native Americans, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the all-loving being manifest himself unto us and grant us abiding understanding and all-consuming divine love. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.